welcome to Many Tribes, One Kingdom. It's your host, Dustin, here, as always, with a good friend of ours, and my co-host.
Hey, it's John.
And we have a wonderful video for you. But let's start off as usual. If you are new here, I would like you to go down, hit that subscribe button, and that bell notification. And if you are current, I would ask that you share these videos, as well as comment. Comment. We love hearing what you guys think about us or what you think about our videos. We love to hear your feedback. Trust me, nothing was more exciting than hear that from somebody that they liked our intro. So keep those comments coming. Without further ado, our topic for today. John.
Yes.
What is our topic for today?
So today we are going to discuss Simon Peter, the apostle.
Peter Simon?
Simon Peter.
All right. Who is Simon Peter? Let's start us off, John. Let's start off from the very, very, very beginning of Simon Peter. And don't be a smart aleck and say, well, he was born.
Well, okay. So he grew up.
John?
So Simon Peter is a fisherman by trade, along with his brother Andrew, who we will cover in a later video. Mm-hmm. And Simon's life with Jesus really, so a couple of background information about Simon before we get into really his life with Jesus. Simon lived in a town called Capernaum, and we know he was married and that his mother-in-law lived with them. Mm-hmm. That's all we know. We don't know whether he had kids or not. The Bible never does say. Some people have believed that he did. Some people believe that he didn't. It really doesn't matter. But it does show that Peter was married. He had a wife and a mother-in-law and was a fisherman by trade. So going from there, Simon's introduction to Jesus is actually through his brother Andrew. Mm-hmm. So Andrew meets Jesus, and then he immediately goes and shares who Jesus is with his brother Simon. And man, Simon is one of those guys who I've always felt that Simon Peter is one of those guys who you'll either love him or you'll hate him. Yeah, you can't be on the fence about him. Yeah, like I always describe him as eager Peter because he's always, he's the fiery one. He's passionate. He's your friend who always wants to jump right in and do stuff. That's me and our friend group. Yeah, I know. So anyway, I think I'm not going to get into the shenanigans that he wants to do. Anyways. So it's fair to say that Simon Peter was the hot-tempered one. Would you agree? Yeah, he definitely, not the most hot-tempered out of the group, but he's definitely, I would describe him as being one of the most rash. Mm-hmm. In the beginning, I'm saying, like in the beginning, would you consider him to be hot-tempered? Yes. And Peter's life with Jesus, he goes from a lot of ups and a lot of downs. Mm-hmm. There are some moments where he just does so well, and then there's moments right after that where he just fails so miserably. The two big ones I can think of are, it was Peter who first recognized that Jesus was the Christ. You can read in Matthew 16 that Jesus is asking the disciples, hey, who do men say that I am? And, they tell him, well, some say you're John the Baptist, raised from the dead. Some say you're Elijah. Some say you're Jeremiah. And then Jesus asks, well, who do you say that I am? And Peter says, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And I love that about Simon Peter. He's the only one who actually gave an answer. Yes. Like an honest answer from his point of view, from his heart, not from what people have said. Yeah. Well, and Jesus tells him that it was the Father who revealed this to Peter. But even still, Peter was the first one to really make that declaration of faith. But then you can read just a few verses later that Peter actually tries to stand in the way of the gospel mission, because Jesus is telling them, I'm going to be crucified. I'm going to die, and I'm going to be raised again. And it says that Peter pulled Jesus aside and said, this will never, happen to you. And Jesus has very strong words for Peter. He says, "Get behind me, Satan, because you are focused on the things of this world and not on the things of God." And this could have been within the same day that Peter made that public declaration of faith. And
exactly. And you see a radical shift in his mentality and his psychology over the course of his time with Jesus. I mean, you see him going from this hot-tempered person to someone who's becoming more even-tempered. We're redirecting a lot of that anger towards something more of a righteous cause, rather than it just being flat-out anger.
Yes.
Rashness. He's
Definitely
more focused. He's more of what you would expect a leader to be. Right?
Yeah. I think one narrative that I love hearing about with Peter was that he was the only one to walk on the water with Jesus. So again, he's always the first one to want to do these things.
Mm-hmm.
But he always ends up failing spectacularly for a very long time. So Peter spends the 3 years with Jesus, 3.5 years, however long it was.
Mm-hmm.
Then we come to the last week of Jesus's life here on earth. And this is where my heart really breaks for Peter, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Because Jesus is telling them again, I'm going to be killed. They're at the Last Supper. And, Peter, I have to guess that Peter is just confused. Because first off, Jesus starts washing the other disciples' feet. Now, this was a job typically for servants or even slaves to do. And Jesus comes and tries to do it for Peter, and Peter's like, no. Peter actually tells him, "You will never wash my feet." But then when Jesus explains it, Peter's like, "Oh, no, wash my feet, my head, and my hands, please." But that's not what I talk about. That's not the part where my heart really breaks for Peter. I'm sorry, am I talking too much? Do you want to say something?
You're good, John.
Okay.
What I love about Peter is, and this at this point, it's my heart really breaks because this is 3.5 years, how long he spent with Jesus. It was a pretty long time. It wasn't like it was a casual acquaintance. Like, he was with Jesus for these amount of years. Like, when you go camping with somebody for that long, you get to know them. They become more than family.
Yeah.
And then we come to the point to when Jesus is at trial.
Mm-hmm.
Peter comes and denies Jesus 3 times, as if those 3 years didn't mean anything. And after Jesus is crucified, what did Peter do? Peter recreated the moment that brought him together with Jesus, going on the boat and fishing. And then he sees Jesus and he comes to him on the beach. I mean, he even leaps out of the boat to go and meet him. And Jesus sits there and he asks the same question 3 times over. And after the 3rd question, Peter just breaks down. You just see the realization. You just see his heart melt in that moment. It's like the full reality of what happened hit the fan. Like, it really came home for Peter. It didn't defeat Peter. And Jesus didn't let it defeat Peter. Jesus, in fact, went on to encourage him, saying, now you're going to be leading the disciples. You're going to be going and doing many great things. You're going to be spreading the message of the gospel. Just know that this is how, and it wasn't more of a said, it was more emphasized. This is how far it's going to have to go.
Yeah, I want to take a back real fast.
Yeah.
Because talking about the denial real fast, I want to go back and really hit this home.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus warned Peter what was going to happen, and Peter, being his eager self, he says, "Lord, I will die with you."
Mm-hmm.
And then not 24 hours later, he denies him 3 times. In fact, the 3rd denial, he calls down a violent curse on himself.
Mm-hmm.
And then, once Jesus was crucified, Peter wasn't even there. Peter, if you don't know, the name Peter means rock.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people want to think that Peter was like Jesus's right-hand man, which he seems to be. He seems to be the one who leads the disciples. He was part of Jesus's inner circle along with James and John. But Peter wasn't even there during the crucifixion. And I personally have to wonder how hard those days were for him after the crucifixion. Mm-hmm. How his heart must have been broken to the point where when Mary tells them, hey, he's alive, John and Peter take off running for the tomb. And Peter, John waits outside of the tomb, but Peter runs right in. He's like, I got to see this. So going back to what Dustin was saying, though, yes, Peter recreates that moment when Jesus first called him. And then he has that meal with Jesus, and Jesus asks him 3 times, do you love me? And it says the last time that Peter says, Lord, you know that I love you. His heart is broken. Mm-hmm. And here's Jesus commissioning Peter to lead. So going past that now, Peter really does step up and take a leadership role, though he doesn't seem to actually be the leader of the church out of the disciples. That almost seems to be the position that James, the brother of Jesus, took. And we'll get to that later. Mm-hmm. But looking at Peter through the book of Acts and Paul's writings, we still see this eager man, and we also see this passionate man, though. Peter was the first one to say, all right, well, we got to replace Judas. Mm-hmm. And then you go forward to the day of Pentecost. Peter was the one to give the first sermon.
Wonderful.
And it's wonderful. You can go and read it. I encourage you to go read it. It's in chapter 2 of the book of Acts. Just go read all of chapter 2. Mm-hmm. In fact, read all of Acts while you're at it.
In fact, why don't you just read the whole Bible?
but right now, I would encourage you to just read the first 4 chapters of Acts and see what a difference comes over Peter. Mm-hmm. Because gone is the coward who ran and hid. Now he is this passionate man. Him and John are preaching in the temple every day about Jesus, even though the high priest has them beaten for doing it. They heal a crippled man and just on and on. And it was Peter who suggested commissioning deacons to take care of the material needs of the church so that they wouldn't have to neglect the gospel preaching. It was also Peter who, in chapter 8 of Acts, has an interesting confrontation with a man named Simon Magus, mm-hmm. who tries to buy the Holy Spirit. Do you remember that incident, Dustin?
No, I actually don't.
So Simon Magus was a magician in Samaria.
Oh, yes, I remember the Simon Magus, yeah.
Yeah, and he tried to buy the Holy Spirit from Peter, and Peter said, may your money perish with you in hell, for you are trying to you have no part in this gospel of ours. So still this fiery man. And then going on, not only is Peter the first one to give a sermon, Peter is also the first one to preach to Gentiles. So non-descendants of Israel. Peter is the first one to preach to them. In chapter 10 of Acts, with the man Cornelius, the Roman, mm-hmm. Peter is the first one to preach to them. Now, Peter also gets arrested, and an angel breaks him out of prison. Chapter 12 of Acts.
One of the most epic scenes you'll ever see.
Right?
Yeah. How did you break out of prison again, Peter? Oh, yeah, an angel broke me out.
The best part is when the angel comes and breaks him out. The angel's just like, he just takes the chains off Peter. He's like, all right, get your stuff, let's go. He literally says that. It's so great. And then from there, Peter really becomes a very active missionary in the church. He seems to have had a relationship with Paul, mm-hmm. a friendship, a close correspondence with Paul. But no man's perfect. And we do have to talk about really Peter's last big failure. Mm. So you can go to chapter 2 of Galatians and read about this. And here's the interesting thing. Even though Peter was the first one to preach to the Gentiles, he also alienated them later on.
Yeah.
there had been a problem between the Jews and the Gentiles over whether Gentile believers had to follow Jewish custom. And Peter took the wrong side, and Paul openly rebuked Peter to his face.
Mm-hmm.
But then we can also look at the Council of Jerusalem and see that Peter was so quick to defend the Gentiles then. So Peter is really, he's such an interesting man. I would love to just sit down and have a conversation with Peter.
I would love to have seen a gospel written by him. Though, again, we have all we need for salvation. I would just love just to read even a portion, even a gospel that he had written, just to see the story from his perspective. It almost makes you want to see that, right, John?
Which leads into something. Do you want to tell him, or you want me to?
Go ahead.
No, you tell him. I'm talking a lot. You tell him.
Guess what? Peter did write one. Though you're probably not going to recognize it because it's not this person's name. In fact, this person's name start with an M. No, not Matthew. Matthew was a disciple. This person wasn't a disciple. Well, a follower, but not a disciple. This person's name is Mark. It is widely believed that Mark was the scribe of Peter, and Peter would dictate his thoughts, or would dictate
what had happened,
what was going on. Yeah, thank you, John. The events or the things that are transpiring around Jesus and the relationship between Peter and Jesus, and ultimately what the disciples were doing. He would dictate that to Mark because he wanted people to get to know Jesus. He wanted people to get to the meat. When you have a meal, you don't want, you got your sides and everything, and then you got your main part of the meal. Peter wanted you to have that main part of the meal first. He wanted you to know Jesus.
Yes.
And the disciples around it, but mostly Jesus. And that's the wonderful part about the Gospel of Mark. Well, you can call it the Gospel of Peter.
Yeah. Or, Mark would have gotten his information from Peter. I don't want to take away credit from Mark. I mean, he did write it down.
He did.
So I don't want to take credit away from him, but he would have gotten his information from Peter.
Mm-hmm.
And you can really kind of tell that this is probably written from Peter's perspective because of how Mark keeps saying immediately after this. And that's Peter right there. Like, Peter was I don't know if they can hear me.
Straight to the point kind of person.
He was let's go. Like, jump. Yeah.
It's sort of like John when he sees fire.
Hey. That's the thing, that I feel like me and Peter would probably get along very well. We're both very eager to do things. We're both those in our friend groups. I've noticed this, and this is the thing I can really relate to Peter. I've noticed this a lot lately.
Mm-hmm.
Both Peter and I in our friend groups are the eager ones. So lastly, we can't talk about Peter without discussing how he died.
Now, disclaimer, there's no official records as to how Peter died, but this is the widely believed customer belief around how he died.
Yes, like there's no official death certificate or anything like that.
Right.
But this is what a lot of early church writers did agree happened to Peter. And until information comes out to the contrary, we're going to take it as fact. So if you may know your Roman history, then you know about Emperor Nero. And Emperor Nero was one of the first people to really launch a major persecution against Christians.
Mm-hmm.
And there was the Great Fire of Rome in, I believe it was 64 AD. I believe that was right.
Yes.
And Nero used that opportunity to blame the fire on Christians. And one of the individuals who got caught up in this wave of persecution was Peter. Now, about his death, there are some rumors that say that Peter did try to leave Rome before he died, but that Jesus stopped him and convinced him to go back and face his martyrdom.
Mm-hmm.
Some who believe that his wife was crucified right along with him.
What was so unique about the crucifixion, John?
So the crucifixion of Peter, Peter was crucified upside down. And that's because, in his own words, he said he was not worthy to die the same way Jesus did. So you can still see this guilt, I feel, that Peter is carrying around with him. So Peter is crucified upside down, and it's a very sad day, I will admit.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously Peter then moved on to glory. He moved on to be with the Lord. He was able to be with his best friend again. So that's the important thing.
Mm.
So we love Peter.
We all have to love Peter. Yeah. So we thank you. Yeah, that's what we have for this one. So this is going to be our new series, and we're going to be covering each of the disciples one per month on the third or fourth Sunday of each month.
Yes. And tell you what. Why don't we let the viewers pick the next disciple we cover?
Okay.
So go to the comments and tell us which disciple you'd like us to talk about next.
Absolutely.
And we're just going to start with the 12 at first. If you want us to cover other ones like Luke and Paul later on, we will. But let's just start. Bartholomew was one of the 12. You're thinking of Barnabas.
No, because Judas was a part of the original 12.
No, you're thinking of Matthias. Bartholomew was one of the 12.
Oh yeah, Matthias. I'm sorry. That's never mind. Thank you guys for watching this video. If you, like we said, go down in the comment section. Let us know which one of the other disciples do you want us to cover. Please, one of the original 12. For right now, we'll have a special time where we'll cover the additional disciples. But we're just talking about the 12 that were with, that followed with Jesus throughout his ministry.
Yeah, just the traditional 12.
Yes. So thank you guys. Have a most wonderful and blessed rest of your day and week.